The bus left her at a crossroads that didn't feel like a crossroads at all, just a stretch of dust and wind and the smell of dry grass baking under the sun. When the bus pulled away, it took the sound of the world with it. Silence settled around her, thick and unwelcoming. Clara adjusted the strap of her worn duffel bag on her shoulder and wondered, not for the first time, how she had ended up here. The ranch truck came an hour later, rattling like it might fall apart before reaching the gate. The driver was a woman with a weathered face and a voice that cut through the air like a knife. She barely asked Clara's name before telling her to climb in. Clara did, gripping the door handle as the truck bounced across land that seemed endless. The horizon didn't move. It only stretched farther, as if daring her to try to escape it. She had taken the job because she needed to disappear for a while. The city had become a place of echoes and reminders. Every street corner held a memory she couldn't outrun, and every quiet night ended with her sitting on the kitchen floor, trying to breathe through the weight of what she had lost. Cooking was the one thing that still made sense. Ingredients obeyed rules. Heat transformed things. If you followed the process, you got something nourishing in the end. It felt like a promise she could still believe in. The bunkhouse kitchen was smaller than she expected, its walls stained with years of grease and laughter and arguments that had probably ended in handshakes. The woman who'd driven her introduced herself as Ruth and told her plainly what the job was. 3 meals a day. Big portions. No complaints tolerated. The men worked hard and expected their food to do the same. That night, Clara cooked chili from a recipe she'd learned from her grandmother, letting it simmer until the air filled with cumin and tomatoes and something like comfort. The cowboys filed in one by one, boots thudding, hats pushed back, eyes tired but alert. They nodded at her, murmured hellos. One of them lingered near the doorway, watching her with a curiosity that made her aware of her own hands, red from chopping onions, steady despite everything. He was younger than she expected, lean and quiet, with eyes the color of rain-soaked earth. He took his bowl and thanked her, his voice low. He sat alone at the far end of the table, listening more than talking, and when he ate, he did it slowly, like the food mattered. Over the next weeks, the routine settled into her bones. She woke before dawn, the cold biting her cheeks as she started the stove. Coffee first, always. Then biscuits or eggs or pancakes, depending on what the men wanted. Lunches packed and wrapped. Dinner hearty enough to make the long days feel worth it. The ranch had its own rhythm, marked by the rising and setting of the sun, by the sounds of cattle lowing in the distance, by the men's laughter drifting in through the open windows. The quiet cowboy came often to help her carry supplies from the truck. He never got in the way, never tried to impress her. He asked simple questions. Where she was from. What she liked to cook. Once, when she burned a pan because her mind had wandered somewhere dark and familiar, he didn't tease. He just handed her a fresh one and said it happened to everyone. His name was Daniel. He said he'd been working the ranch for a few years. When she asked him if he planned to stay, he shrugged and said he took things as they came. It felt honest, like he wasn't trying to hide anything. That mattered to her more than she could explain. One evening, after the men had eaten and drifted off to their bunks, Clara sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the last of the daylight fading through the window. Daniel came in quietly, holding a chipped mug. Ruth said there's more coffee, he said, nodding toward the pot. Help yourself, Clara replied. He poured the coffee and didn't leave. He leaned against the counter, looking at the floor. You cook like you care, he said after a moment. She laughed softly, surprised by the catch in her throat. I don't know how to do it any other way. He nodded, as if that explained everything. Then he said, this place can feel lonely, even when it's full of people. Clara met his eyes. Something in his expression told her he understood loneliness in a way that went beyond empty rooms. As days turned into months, the ranch began to feel less like an exile and more like a place where she could breathe again. She found herself smiling without thinking, humming while she worked. The ache inside her didn't disappear, but it softened, like a scar you could touch without flinching. She learned the men's stories in pieces. Divorces, debts, dreams put on hold. The land seemed to hold their secrets, absorbing them into the soil. Daniel shared little, but when he did, it was thoughtful. He talked about responsibility and patience, about how some things grew slowly and couldn't be rushed. One afternoon, a storm rolled in fast, dark clouds swallowing the sky. Clara watched from the porch as rain pounded the earth, turning dust into mud. Daniel stood beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "Storms change things," he said quietly. She thought of the life she'd left behind, of the suddenness with which everything had fallen apart. "Sometimes they just destroy," she replied. He shook his head. "They make room, too." The words stayed with her. The truth came out on a morning that began like any other. Clara was kneading dough when Ruth burst into the kitchen, her face pale. "The owner's coming," she said. "Didn't give much notice. Wants to see how things are run." Clara's stomach tightened. She'd heard about the owner, but no one ever talked about him like he was real. He was an idea, a distant authority. She wiped her hands on her apron and tried to calm herself. The men gathered, straightening their hats, muttering about inspections and expectations. When a sleek black truck pulled up, it felt out of place against the rawness of the land. The man who stepped out wasn't a stranger. It was Daniel. For a moment, Clara thought she was mistaken. But he moved differently now, more assured, greeting Ruth by name, shaking hands with a familiarity that spoke of ownership. The air shifted, heavy with unspoken realization. Daniel caught her eye across the yard. Something like regret flickered in his expression. Later, when the ranch buzzed with activity and polite conversation, he found her in the kitchen. He closed the door behind him. "I wanted to tell you," he said. "I just didn't know how." She stared at him, anger and embarrassment tangling in her chest. "So all this time, you were watching us? Pretending?" "I wasn't pretending," he said, his voice earnest. "I grew up here. I worked alongside everyone else. I needed to know this place from the ground up. And I didn't know you'd be here." She crossed her arms, feeling foolish. "You let me think you were just another hired hand." "I am," he replied softly. "I just happen to own the land." The words hung between them. She wanted to walk away, to retreat into the safety of indignation. But another truth pressed in. He had treated her no differently before she knew. He had listened. He had helped. He had seen her when she felt invisible. "Why hide it?" she asked. "Because people act differently," he said. "And because I needed to remember why this place matters. It's not about money or power. It's about people." She searched his face, looking for arrogance, for deception. She found none. Only vulnerability. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he added. "If you want to leave, I'll understand." The idea of leaving twisted something inside her. The ranch had become more than a job. It was a refuge. "I need time," she said. He nodded. "Take all you need." In the days that followed, Clara wrestled with her feelings. She thought about trust, about how easily it could fracture. She thought about her past, about the promises that had broken her heart, about the fear of believing again. Daniel gave her space. He went back to working, dust on his boots, hands callous like always. Nothing else changed. The men laughed the same. The land stretched on, indifferent to human confusion. One evening, Clara found herself cooking Daniel's favorite meal without meaning to. When she realized what she was doing, she almost stopped. But she didn't. She served it as she always did. After dinner, he lingered again. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly, surprising herself. "For being angry." "You had every right," he replied. "I'm just tired of being blindsided," she said. "Of thinking I know where I stand, only to find out the ground has shifted." He considered this. Sometimes the ground shifts so we can see what's solid. They stood in silence, the weight of unsaid things heavy but not unbearable. Weeks passed. The tension eased, replaced by a cautious understanding. Daniel involved her in decisions about the kitchen, asked her opinion on things that mattered. He listened, really listened. Slowly, trust rebuilt itself, not as it had been before, but stronger for having been tested. One night, after a long day, they sat outside under a sky so full of stars it felt unreal. The air was cool, the scent of grass sharp and clean. "I used to think I had to leave to heal," Clara said. "But maybe I just needed a place that didn't demand anything from me except honesty." Daniel looked at her. "I'm glad you found it here." She took a breath, feeling the truth settle in her chest. "Me too." The ranch changed, subtly. New ideas took root. The men noticed the care in their meals, the way the kitchen felt like a home. Daniel invested not just money but heart, honoring the land and the people who worked it. And Clara found herself planting roots she hadn't planned on. She taught some of the men how to cook, laughing at their clumsy attempts. She wrote letters she never sent, forgiving herself for the past. On the anniversary of her arrival, Daniel asked her to walk the far pasture with him. They stood at the edge of the land, the sun setting in a blaze of color. "This place is yours as much as mine," he said. "If you want it." She thought of the crossroads where the bus had left her, of the woman she had been then. She thought of storms and room to grow. "I think I've been standing on it all along," she said. He smiled, and in that moment, Clara understood that sometimes the greatest transformations happen not when we run, but when we stay, open to the unexpected truths beneath our feet.